Stuart McCall has ridiculed Ian Black after Black tore into McCall earlier this week. Speaking on Ferry's Open Goal podcast, Black said, "I didn't know him, McCall. Didn't know anything about him. What was the problem with him? I don't know, I'd have to meet him in a dark alley and ask him." Recalling the time he was left out of Rangers' 2015 playoff final defeat against Motherwell, Black said, "I sat down in the kit and he came over and put his arm around me. No joke, he said, 'I know you're going to be disappointed,' and I just looked at him. Read more. He went, 'I'm not going to involve you today. I totally understand if you want to take your keys and go home.' I went, 'Are you effing winding me up, UCT?' That was it. No respect for the guy. No respect whatsoever." Black also accused McCall of favouring Andy Murdoch because his auntie cut the manager's hair. Speaking in Record Sport, McCall said, "Black's comments are disappointing because they are lies. Ian is sounding like an angry and bitter little man here. The whole haircut thing is just embarrassing. He came to see me about 4 or 5 weeks into my tenure at Rangers. He was an experienced player, but Kyle Hutton and Andy had been given their chance in his absence. Murdoch scored a screamer at Raith Rovers and he was training well too. Ian came to see me and asked what he could do to get in the team." Ian Black in the dugout at Recreation Park, Image, SNS Group. "I told him that if Rangers played with 2 holding midfielders he'd be in the team, but that we were trying to win games so we didn't need to. Murdoch, who was taking his place, was the club's most consistent player. Ian accepted that and told me that he would keep his head down and knuckle down in training and do his best. He did his best, but it wasn't good enough to get ahead of Murdoch. Ian could only play one position, and that was defensive midfielder, and we had somebody doing that job. As a professional he trained really well, but there was a lad ahead of him and I only played one holding midfielder who was playing better." Ian shook my hand and said he was glad he had spoken to me. He totally got where I was coming from and said he couldn't argue with it. Read more. In the lead up to the Motherwell games, Ian had hardly been involved. He was never going to feature in the playoff, as I felt we didn't need an extra defensive midfielder on the bench. He never really showed any respect for Murdoch either, and he was one of our better players. Maybe he couldn't accept that. Ian is suffering a bit from selective memory. A year ago he was also banging on about storming out of my office when I was the Rangers manager, but that never happened. When I first went into Rangers, Black wasn't even in the 18. He had been bombed after a defeat by Celtic. I knew the morale of the place was low when I took over as Rangers manager. I was told that a lot of the punters had turned on the players and had given up on them, and Ian was one of them. I remember we played Hibs and we were 2-0 up and I put him on the park. Naturally Ian got booed at Easter Road because he was an ex-Hearts player, but one of the staff told me that the Rangers supporters were also booing him as well. A few days later I brought him on against Cowdenbeath and the same thing happened. Ian was also the first player I ever fielded that was booed onto the park. I was told that stemmed from being caught betting against Rangers, but I didn't know the ins and outs, and I certainly never held it against him. It's funny because when I was the manager of Bradford and he was playing for Shrewsbury, he came over and shook my hand and said, "How's things going, Gaffer? I won't be losing sleep over it." Read more. Rangers FC News. Let's block ads.